let's start with the users. What the end users really want, and how relevant is the quality of experience in relation with these contents and formats? Greg, I don't know if you would mind opening the panel?
Sure, yeah. Well, to date, Warner Brothers has been most active in creating promotional content for our feature films and some of the television episodic. A great deal of that has been 360-degree spherical video, which is inherently challenged with some problems because of the nature of how it's captured and stitched and packaged and distributed. So quality has always been a challenge because if you're going to make the quality better, you're going to spend more human time in post-production. And some of the benefits of the future, we hope, are being able to do more experimentation with real-time game engine rendered content where there may still be video content, pre-rendered video within the game engine, but it's also live interactivity and choice given to the creatives to tell the story or to make the case. So quality makes a big difference. Right now, the 3 degrees of freedom, that limitation of mobile HMDs, is something that we're managing, but a great many of the more robust experiences are on the 6 degrees of freedom of a PC or console-based system.
I see. Richard, what is your view about the impact of the consumption devices on the quality and at the end the quality of experience in 360 and VR mainly?
It's interesting because at the moment we have head-mounted displays, mainly phone-based, which is where most of the consumption is going on, that are relatively low resolution. So the content's got to be quite compelling and well shot and well produced to be able to overcome the limitations of the display device. If the content's engaging and people are willing to pursue it, if it's entertaining and it's not too long form, I think people will engage very well indeed. And in fact, I've tried everything from the high-end scripted drama right the way through to documentary and live production as well. But if the content is engaging and well made, then people will generally watch it. If you then move on, as Greg was saying, to some form of additional engagement, i.e. interactivity or choice of story development, then it becomes very, very compelling and still within the capabilities of a simple head-mounted display.
Would you say that the mobile phones as an, let's say, entry point, or the device that is available for most of the audiences, matches all the content?
Yes and no. I mean, the mobile phone is a great enabler in this business. The fact that the majority of people in the world have a mobile phone that's capable of displaying in some form or other 360 content is a huge advantage. On the other hand, the limitations that you have in terms of the content design, whether it's interactive, whether it's Unity or plain 360 based, is a factor. The other factor is how it's delivered to the phone, the bandwidth, quality of encoding, and the general experience therefrom.
You know, Oscar, it's important to notice how the industry has adapted. It's like the old days of taking a radio program and putting it on television because television was a new medium. You've seen a lot of what we call virtual cinema, where you're put into a virtual environment that's a darkened cinema and you're still watching a rectangle video up on the screen, whether it's a feature-length movie or if it's Netflix. And I understand that from a point of view of migration, but it's not VR. It's an accommodation. What happens in that environment is people get acclimated to the concept of wearing a darkened, head-mounted display that darkens and obfuscates all the rest of the world around them, which is in and of itself a unique experience for people.
That's very interesting. You mentioned resolution, 4K, HD, 8K. What is the right format for representing most of the 360 produced content nowadays? What is the right format for doing?
Well, the right format in terms of the system is a system where you can't see the pixel grid of the display device, and the content is is rendered, is produced and rendered to make sure that it makes the most of the resolution of the system. So I think that depends obviously on your display device, but currently resolutions that are supported by a range of devices range from 960 at the bottom end right the way up through to 4K by 2K at the top end, in data ranges of 6 megabits per second up to 80, 100 megabits a second. So there's a wide range of devices, and it's tailoring the delivery platform to match that, and thinking about that when you're actually creating the content as well.
And it's not just resolution, right? It's frame rate and contrast. High dynamic range is an element of realism in that environment.
Okay. What about the negative side of or the adverse effects of the quality of experience, like the fatigue that you might be suffering, if you're exposed to 360 video for a long time? David, do you have a view about that?
Sure. I mean, this is this goes back to the start of 3D, which, as you say, perhaps is a is a sort of a story that we've been telling for a while. That the quality of the experience is dictated by how well the content can be absorbed by a viewer without them feeling too uncomfortable about what they're seeing. So, in the 3D world, we had the issues of parallax and so on. In the VR world, we go further than that, because there's a lot more going on in this space, and so we have to make sure that if we're trying to tell a long form story in particular, that we do it in a way that isn't too extreme, so that people can stay engaged with the content for more than just a couple of minutes. Because certainly some of the content we've seen since the sort of start of this big VR sort of hype is so extreme that within just a minute or so, people are beginning to feel this is pretty uncomfortable, and I've got to take the headset off, and I've got to re-engage with the real world. So for sure, we need to be very careful about that.
A couple of years ago, when people were first starting to develop content for VR, there was some rules that were being thrown around of no camera dolly movement, because that will cause the motion sickness, no jump cuts, things of this nature. At more of the recent conferences, people have said, forget those rules, let's try things, because a certain amount of movement of camera or a certain amount of jump can be managed based on not only the quality of the equipment, which has gotten better in 2 years, but also in regard to how emphatic that is in the rendering and presentation.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the movement in a camera, if you can suspend disbelief or make someone believe that there's something they're not, then movement's absolutely quite good. So you can be in a car, the car can be moving all over the place because you're in a car, you believe it. If you're an aeroplane or a bird, again, motion is quite acceptable. On the other hand, if I was to try and emulate human walking by moving the camera up and down as I go forward, then 98% of viewers will feel very sick within a few seconds. So it's a question of learning how the human overall perceptive system works, and how we can emulate, mirror, or not introduce disaffection with the viewer.
And even simpler than just movement. You notice sometimes with content, if it's shot from a particular angle, it makes you feel quite uncomfortable, because you're looking up and there's someone there, and you think, well, the same height as me, so why am I? What's going on here?
Yes,
and so you need to. The story needs to make it obvious that that's your viewpoint.
Right.
Okay, you mentioned a couple of unsorted challenges in live VR production. What about the lighting and capturing the images in 360 live production? Is there any limitation that you would say today that it could impact the quality of experience on the audiences, Richard?
I think you have to use ingenuity to be able to light things in a way that's realistic, and also to avoid seeing the lights in the scene. And if you've got a live or live action that you're capturing outdoors, generally you can get away with it with ambient lighting, whether it's sort of daytime, evening, or whatever. When it comes to a more produced studio situation, if you're shooting green screen elements, that's fine. Obviously the lighting can be comped out, or alternatively you can introduce, as I've done recently on a ballet production for English National Ballet, you can introduce form motion capture to be able to film the dance and the scene separately from each other, and therefore play with the lighting in between the composited elements. But generally, there have been attempts to put LED panels underneath the camera to light things. It's very difficult to hide stuff. The advantage that you do have is if you've done your job properly, you've attracted the viewer's attention in the direction you want them to look, and therefore you can hide stuff in the background that they don't necessarily see. But that's a compromise.
How critical is the quality of the CCDs, the optics in the cameras? Because mostly we have seen in this exhibition cameras that they target the consumer end. What about the professional end? How critical it is, the quality of these elements?
My belief is that the best pictures are produced by a camera system which has a lens with an iris to control exposure and a global shutter to prevent rolling shutter effects. Right. On the other hand, these cameras are generally pretty big, and the rigs if you have an array of these cameras to try and capture a 360 scene, it becomes unmanageable really in terms of complexity, and most importantly, the distance between subject and camera starts to increase as well. Therefore, you get miniaturization, unfair perspective challenges, and it's very difficult. So some of the best stuff that's out there at the moment is shot using a camera system and compositing. So you can use a conventional 3D rig, particularly as I prefer using, and comp in foreground and background elements. And then for a live capture situation, you need something that's small, compact, and you generally have to be forced into a monoscopic 360 capture.
Mm. And is it critical, the stitching process in real time, if you wish, for these production schemes in 360?
It is critical, yes. I mean, stitch lines can detract very rapidly from the viewer experience, especially if there's motion around the frame. The other thing as well is that generally 99% of the commercially available rigs create a 360 image from diverging cameras, and therefore with wide angle lenses, when you move from crossover from one view to another, you're going to get perspective distortion as a result of the lens systems that are used. So things like that you can hide if you choreograph your action to keep within a couple of angles. But generally, people should be aware of this, and so it doesn't distract from the viewing experience.
David, what about data compression and scalability in 360 and VR? What parameters do broadcasters need to work within to ensure the adequate quality for the end viewers?
Well, I think this is a thing that sort of, it changes all the time as we understand the technology. Is we've got HEVC now, which is our new sort of standard for compression, and that's been 10 years to sort of get to this point. As we roll that forward and we understand more about how we can drive HEVC harder and we can drive the silicon harder to produce smaller and smaller bandwidth systems for delivery and so on, then we can basically cram more data, and what we want to be able to do is cram as much data down the wire or across the satellite or whatever transmission mechanism you're looking at. And the more data we can actually chuck at the consumer, the better ultimately their experience is going to be, assuming their headset can take advantage of that. So you've got enough pixels and so on. So encoding is one of those things that's just it's a background thing that we're constantly improving. And so what's capable we can do today, next week we'll be able to do another 3% or another 5% or whatever. So there's a lot of focus on it when I don't necessarily think it's actually it's the real heart of this. We've already sort of touched on it before. The real heart of this is what makes a consumer want to watch something. Is it a good story? Is it told well? Is it compelling? And can they engage with it long enough for it to actually be something that we can, you can monetize, if you like? So,
the other thing on the data side of things is, of course, that you've got to fine-tune things for your delivery platforms. So, for instance, at Sky, on our app, we have 6 profiles we encode to. Because Sky has the opportunity to download at higher resolution or stream live buffer download. So you have to account for Samsung phones, iPhone, HTC, all running different processors. So a bit of intelligence in the app to work out what you've got, to get the right content to you is important. On the other hand, if you look at the delivery format, which is a lat-long image, 2:1 aspect ratio lat-long image, the highest image complexity within that lat-long, because of the distortion, is the top and bottom of frame, where you're not likely to actually look. So if you can concentrate high-quality encoding on the center 2/3 band and limit the data compression with noise reduction at the top and bottom, you can actually enhance the thing for quite low data rates. So that's a way forward.
Greg, would you say that traditional content distribution networks can cope with this job that Richard was mentioning? Are they really today suited for distributing this time of content, or should we expect any kind of further development in this field?
When you say traditional content, do you mean film?
I would say that OTT delivery, non-linear, 360, over content distribution networks, CDN networks.
Sure. It's an interesting question because we talk in our industry about creative intent and maintaining creative intent of the director and the DP, for instance, in a film, and an OTT delivery system that uses adaptive bitrate reduction and maybe other sorts of things. By the time it gets to the end television, it may not maintain creative intent. And so we, to some degree, don't focus on that, and it's tolerated today by the creative side of the business because it's not thought of as the premium experience. The premium experience is still cinema. But the idea that, that where the user's looking, the foveated rendering, could be a component to making a more adaptive bitrate system that's actually more higher efficiency, like Richard described, but also get a better quality is actually very attractive. But I think it's going to take a companionship. It's going to take creatives working with technologists to understand the total system to actually get the desired result. So I think, is it amenable? Is our traditional content amenable to that? Yes, but it's not just throw the content over the wall and let the technology sort it out. It's a collaborative effect. In fact, that's one of the things I've seen in this industry of virtual reality and augmented reality is it's so highly involved with the technology. Things such as 360, spherical video, the way that the projection mappings are being done affects the creative, that there's a real symbiosis right now between how technical creatives understand and how much the creative elements of storytelling are being understood by the technologists. It's actually a very interesting time.
And actually, can I take that opportunity, really, I suppose, to sort of say that, there are alliances forming out there. There's the VR Industry Forum, which is literally just about to sort of get going, that are trying to pull all of that stuff together. So from the end, from as you say, the creative at one end, through all of the silicon, all the production systems, right the way through to the display end of things, to try and link all that up. Because the better we are at making that seamless and actually delivering that creative intent, the better the consumer is actually going to feel about what they're seeing. So,
Indeed, yeah.
We have been discussing about quality mostly. What are the mechanisms that content owners, content producers, content distributors, broadcasters, they have today available for controlling the end user experience? Do we measure that? Do we capture and process that data?
You could say post-production. All the coloring and the time in the edit bay is allowing the artist to really fine-tune the result. But I think you were more alluding to the actual consumer user experience and the analytics that might be around understanding how that's delivered.
That's it.
So the analytics will tell you the number of downloads, number of views, the duration of view, number of repeat views. So that gives you a good indication of how something is doing. Especially uptake and new release, so you can compare things as rollout happens. But there is nothing also that can't beat genuine, boots on the ground UX research as well, because then you can drill down into individual perceptions of people. You can get a measurement of how many people are likely to engage with wearing a headset, how many people like tablet, and that gives you a steer on how you generate and try and promulgate your material.
Well, it's the nature of it being wearable technology avails a whole lot of opportunities. For instance, just a low-hanging fruit is a heat map to see where people are looking. If you go to the cinema, it's very hard to capture a heat map of where everyone in all the seats is looking. But when you're wearing the display and it's just there as a byproduct of the technology, you can now look at what parts of the picture have people focused in on.
So how do we ensure end-to-end good quality, a good quality of experience at the end for the audience? What are the critical steps? Where would you say that you need to pay attention to this, you need to pay attention to this, and where we close the cycle?
Start off at the beginning with screenwriting.
Yeah.
And idea development. Something that's going to engage the audience, written by people that understand how the medium works, rather than try and shoehorn something into something where it won't work. That's the first thing. Secondly is understand what works and what doesn't work in 360 and VR, and then use that experience and knowledge to further engagement. And that's, if you haven't done that, then the encoding and whatever can be as good as you like, and the delivery platform can be seamless, but you won't get any viewing. So
we were talking about this earlier on, actually, sort of over coffee, and we were saying that, you know, the real thing here is, you know, why are you producing VR? What is the additional thing you get out of this being in VR? And you're right, Richard. That's got to come from the original idea as to, you know, when I'm writing it, I'm making this something that actually works in VR and has to be in VR. Otherwise, it's just nothing.
Well,
right?
yeah, story needs to drive the technology, not technology driving the story.
yeah,
Indeed.
yeah.
Okay, we have some minutes for questions from the audience. Yes, please.
Hello. Thank you for the very interesting discussion. I just have a question related to how much of the content do you... Actually, I have two questions. One is, how much proportion of the content do you think will be 360 and how much would be 180 degrees, so only one sphere? And the second one, related to that, because VR comes with two panes. One is for the infrastructure providers to provide the bandwidth, and the other one is more physical, the neck pane. So how many customers would actually like to look around when they watch the VR content? And there are technologies to, like the one presented by Huawei here, to limit that, to only stream to customers the field of view they are actually looking at. But obviously, when there is a head movement, there would be a delay. So do you have any experience with that, and do you think that would solve a problem of the well, the second one would actually solve the problem with the streaming?
To answer your first point, should content be 360 or 180? Generally, most of the content out there has been designed for people that are seated, where you've got a sort of arc of probably about 200 degrees. On the other hand, there is a lot of content out there that recommends you stand or sit in a swivel chair so you can work all the way around. I think probably the seated approach is a bit more cautious because people are perhaps worried about litigious viewers falling over and disorientation or whatever. But basically, if your creative idea requires people or enhances a situation, if you can turn around and view something behind you, then I don't think there's a problem in it. It depends how you design the content.
I think there's also there's a lot of discussion today on the hardware side, devices about field of view and how wide the field of view is this way. Many people ignore the importance of field of view this way. If you just look at the physiology of our eyes, you know, there's a whole lot of reference material of information that we process every day when we walk around and look, that's right here between our feet and up to our eye level. And so all of those things become cues to telling a story or to providing an experience that may not be something where you actually turn and focus upon it, but you're aware that there's motion over here and that plays into the story. So the more limited the field of view in these areas, the more you have to move your head to look around. So I think that it all plays together as to the overall experience, and it does depend on the use case, whether you're telling a story, you're in CG versus live action, or whether you're looking at live sports or some sort of live event, breaking news, things of that nature. It's very different use cases, and will have different drivers live sports has gotten away with 180 degree view largely because no one cares to see behind them in the stands. And so I think again the technology needs to adapt to what we want to do with the story, whether the story is a sports event or otherwise.